everybody, Invisiblekatana here with my review for Supergirl. I'm literally in my car. I'm in the parking lot leaving the theater right now, so I'm on the road and everything. Finally got to see the movie because obviously I'm super late, but it was like the last week to see this movie. Probably because it's been bombing, which is unfortunate, but I was like, I really do want to see this movie in theaters, and who the F knows, even though things come to streaming, you got to pay for it when it comes to streaming quick. Normally you got to wait a couple months for the free stuff, so I was like, you know what? Let's get out and about and see this epic thing. So just got out of the theater, and of course there will be spoilers in the second half, as the title says, but I'll let you guys know when we get to that. So kicking things off, non-spoiler wise, I thought it was fine. I was surprised, obviously I haven't watched any of the movies talking about the discourse, and I don't even bother caring about, the anti-woke crowd, because if anything fails, they'll jump on that so they can blow loads all over its failure, which is weird to me, because I'm like, okay. But aside from that, I'm like, okay, it hasn't been doing too well. Obviously word of mouth hasn't been like the craziest thing, so clearly people aren't falling in love with it. So I was kind of excited to see, just to be like, well, how do I feel about it? I thought it was fine. Honestly, I got out of it and I was like, okay, do I like this or Superman more? I would say I like the story of Superman more, because I'd say, for one, even though it's obviously, it's hard to say this, where it's like, oh, it's more unique, but even though it's Superman, it was a very different telling of a Superman story. Plus, I love the fact that it was like so hopeful and everything. Like, I'm one of the people that's like, you're an idiot if you're like, why did he save that squirrel? I'm like, that is like the perfect, well-written, cheesy Superman moment. It's like him saving a squirrel during a boss battle. So I was like, I enjoyed exactly how Superman was written in that film. So I really enjoyed that for its story. And with this, it was definitely more generic. Someone comes to somebody else, hey, I want to seek revenge, and it's like, we'll see what happens. And it was kind of like that. So that's how I felt, watching the movie. And it was like, okay, story-wise, fairly simple. Nothing, utterly insane or too crazy like that. But I did enjoy it. I definitely enjoyed it. I think the action was better. I would say the action stood out to me a little bit more. And that's just, her fighting style. So I enjoyed the action like a little bit more in this movie than in Superman. But overall, I would say I enjoyed Superman a little bit more. I think this just had higher heights because I'm, a big action person. But I still enjoyed the movie as a whole. Like, I didn't think there was any, I can say generic for sure, but I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. I was like, oh, this is perfectly fine to me. Like, nothing crazy. I can say that I have not read the comic it's based off of. So aside from knowing that like the main character I know, or the main villain I should say, looks drastically different than he does from the comics, there's not much that I really know about that story. Because of course, I don't like to go into it if I didn't already know the story, I don't like reading the story in advance for comparison, because in all honesty, that it could make it worse. I mean, honestly, if there's anything missing, I'm not aware of it just yet. So it could easily be one of those things where it's way worse. So for me, it was kind of just seeing the story, but I enjoyed it. I did find it interesting, which, is some stuff that we'll get into spoiler wise. And I don't know if that's from the comic where they changed some stuff for Kara, but once again, different interpretations and universes and all that stuff, retellings of characters. Heck, even within the technical universe of, DC Comics, there's multiple origins for multiple characters because of everything they've done. So, there's a lot to it. Technically, every origin for every character exists, if we're being honest. But, comic books, they're silly like that. So I was perfectly fine seeing it, and I thought they did something really interesting with that. But overall, I thought it was okay. I was like, all right, I like the action. I thought the story was fairly decent, nothing utterly insane. Kara's going after some people where she wasn't going to help this girl out. Then she decides, all right, well, now they pissed me off because they hurt my dog. Now I'm going to help you. I'm not even going to help you out. I'm going to do what you want, but I'm not really helping you out. And the girl just kind of keeps tagging along. Classic kid situation where it's like, please stop doing this thing. And then they always do that thing. So very classic. So in that sense, that's why I feel like a part of me is like, all right, story-wise, I definitely prefer Superman over this, because it's definitely in that super cliche realm of just like, one character has a revenge story. The main character is like, I'm kind of just trying to find myself a little. It's a tale as old as time. It's just got a Supergirl skin on it this time. But I didn't mind it. It was just generic, and it just has Supergirl involved. So there was, more action in it. And I did like Lobo. Lobo was cool popping up. They even had his actual, the blade on a chain. Like, it was perfect representation of the blade. I was like, okay, it was accurate. So I enjoyed that. Of course, he was Aquaman, and it was like, weird, he should have been Lobo, and now we have it. So it was perfectly fine. But I enjoyed the film. I thought the action was good. I thought the story was good. Like I said, I thought it was kind of simple and nothing crazy. That's why I'm curious to see what other people thought that actually read the comics, because I'm curious how deep they went into certain elements of Supergirl in the story. Because in this, I feel like, they did the classic thing where it's like, it's kind of, for a lot of people, it is like the origin of this universe as far as the origin film for Supergirl. So you'll know, where she's from and stuff like that. And, lots of, little things here and there where I was like, okay, are they going to do it this way? Or are they going to do it that way? Like, how's the city separated and stuff like that? And I was surprised. Once again, haven't read the comics, so I don't know if that's how they do it in the comics or not. But I like the way they handled it. I thought the emotional stuff, like when they actually got to the like sadder side of her character, I thought it was really good. Those were probably my favorite parts, story-wise, of the entire film, was her like actually just dealing with it. And I think that's always my favorite part of those types of stories, because the story itself is kind of generic, where it's just kind of like whatever random bad thing happens on the outside is always more of a, like the whole technical story of the movie feels like more of a plot device for just the character to figure out like where they want to go in the future. So it's always kind of like, all right, well, as long as the story on the outside is good enough, when you get like the really deep parts and like the sad stuff is like, okay, that's what I enjoy the most. So I would say I wish we got more of it, but I'm also not entirely sure how you can get more out of it when it's like, yeah, they told the whole story. So it was all there. So like the actual sadder parts of the story, I definitely enjoyed the most, where it was like she had to kind of wrestle and like tell exactly what her current history is, where it's like, this is why things just kind of suck for me right now. So I like that. I personally, that was my favorite part of the story, but it was definitely that little thing where, like I said, in any story, when it's that way of a character, figuring out who they are, it's like, here are the couple of moments of their past, and it makes up maybe like, probably like 10 minutes of the whole movie or something. And it's like, I kind of wish it was more than 10 minutes. I like the darker, like the sadder stuff that's just hard for them to get through. I appreciate that side of the story. I just like darker stories too. So that might be another element where it's like, love a good Superman story where he's super happy and hopeful. But I'm one of those people that's like, I love a dark story. I like stories that just, where it's like, dang, they just killed everybody. That's effed up. But like, I love it for the art. So I like a darker story, but I appreciated this one. So it is what it is at this point. It's made what it's made. It's going to be out of theaters anyway, so I can't be like, hey, I recommend checking it out. I think it is what it is. Either you've seen it by now or you haven't. But as far as non-spoilers go, I thought it was pretty good. So jumping into spoilers, full-on spoilers, if you have not seen it, I thought the action, like I said, was pretty good, and the sad part was my favorite. And I'm gonna start there, because what they did with Kara as far as Kandor, because it's like, hey, is it the bottled city of Kandor? Well, she's an Argo, so I was thinking Kandor. But with her being an Argo, I was like, well, is it, are they going to do that? Because I think in the trailers, they kind of made it seem like, all right, well, it's cut off. So I was like, are they going to switch it where it's like Kandor, where it's the bottled city and all that stuff? So I was really curious how that was going to play out. And it was like, nope, they just domed off Argo. And then they just kind of survived for a while. And then they also made it canonically where she is younger than Clark is. So even without, they didn't do like the time displacement and all that stuff where they both got sent out at the same time and all that. It was like, nope, she's actually just younger than he is. And she was born even after the planet was destroyed. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. And then because of how the city was captured, it unearthed kryptonite. And even when she was like being sent off from the planet, you could see like the crystals underneath like the chunk of the city that was left over. And I was like, that's actually kind of cool. Super sad and dark, where it's like, they were like, hey, we survived and everything was pretty cool for a hot minute. And then people started getting basically radiation poisoning just from the straight up soil. Her mom dies, her dad gets sick, and he's about to die. And then it's like, she just finds Krypto, which I thought that was an interesting way to do that. Like, it started off where they show how she met Krypto, and it was just like, it looks like it's just a ceremony. They're all dressed up, so it seems like it's, maybe a religious ceremony or something. And then later in the film, you realize it's actually, she saw Krypto while marching towards her mother's, I can't really say burial, cremation. And I was like, oh, that's a cool way to tie that together. It's very sad, but it adds to the level of, oh, he wasn't her dog the entire time, and then everything happened, and then they both survived together. It was like, as the city was falling apart, and literally the day of her mother's funeral, she found her dog, and then that is the last thing. And then of course her dad gave her the watch when he sent her off, and I was like, oh, it's just sadder and sadder. And I was like, this is really good though. So I like the way they did that, and him like capturing the city and saving it. And then it was like, I thought saving it worked, and it did for however many years, basically like 20 something years, almost like 30 straight years. And it was just, actually it was like 30 years, because the planet blew up 8 years before she was even born. So it was like for 30 years, they were pretty much good. And, a little bit less considering, when people started getting sick. But it was like, oh, that's an interesting way to do that. And it was like a really sad way where she slowly lived through it. It wasn't just like, hey, the planet blew up and then I remember it. Because that's always the story, where it's like she remembers Krypton, but she actually like lived through just her city. So it's an even different story where it's like she didn't have all of Krypton, she just had her city. So it makes it even smaller. And then she even lost that, and it wasn't like it blew up and then she woke up later because of stasis and all that crap. It was like, no, I just slowly watched my dad fade into the distance as I left the tiny chunk of Krypton that was left over. And it was like, that was actually really good. So I personally, I think that was like my favorite part of the whole story, because it was just kind of effed up, and it was like, wow, that's dark. but I really love that part. And then everything else, like I said, fairly generic. She was drunk, she's trying to figure out her place. This girl comes along because her family got wiped out, which was a crazy scene in the beginning as well, where the dude killed everybody. I don't know if I would assume he saw the daughter because he turned around and killed her brother. So he would have had to have seen her, but he didn't even bother. Like, it was like, dang, he killed them. And it was fast too. I thought it was gonna be like a fight scene and like, they kind of held out or the dad kind of falls. Like, nah, he pushed the mom, snapped her neck super fast. He had a blade, stabbed the dude in the stomach, lifted him up like it was Mortal Kombat, and then just dropped it. It was like, okay, I'm out. And then he just left. I was like, that was so much faster than I thought from the trailers. I was shocked. I was like, dang, he killed him so fast. I'm kind of effed up a little. But simple story, ends up, bonding with the girl and they go on their adventure. Like, there's so little to tell where it's just like they go through little bits and pieces of fighting and stuff where it's like, okay, this is interesting. Come across Lobo, he's interesting. I like the fact that Carr actually knew who he was already, so that was kind of fun. But it was cool. Like I said, after that, it's kind of just like the action sequences. The story's kind of generic. I was shocked by the green sun thing. I'm very curious to see if that was in the comics because I've never heard of that. So I'm kind of shocked. I was like, a green sun. I've literally somehow, amongst all of DC, I've never seen that come into play. So if that is only in that comic, that's interesting. So I'm very curious to see if that was actually in that original comic the movie's based on, or if they actually just made that up for the movie. And I'm like, okay. Like, I don't hate that personally. I'm like, that's an interesting way to go about it, especially because it was green, green to yellow sun. So I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. I was curious if they were going to do like a red sun at the end, but I was like, I wasn't expecting them to just bust out a green sun. So I was like, okay, that's a nice little twist. And then of course, it went exactly as I expected. I was like, okay, it's a green and a yellow sun. So of course, she's out of the movie for a hot minute, and then it leaves the other characters to do what they need to do. And then of course, eventually the yellow sun comes back up and it's like, all right, she's gonna end up fighting, and then they win at the end. So I wasn't expecting anything crazy, but it was still fun to, go through and see the action play out. And I thought they did a decent job with that. And then of course, she's just beating everybody up at the end. It's like, okay, cool. Lobo, saw her do that. So I think they could bring that back later on, especially with some conversations, depending on whether or not Superman pops up and has to deal with Lobo. It's like, hey, I watched your cousin stab a dude like 2 separate times. Like, come on now, like, you guys aren't all goody goody two shoes. So they could bring that back into play, and I think that would be interesting, a little ways down the line. But I thought it was fine. Like I said, nothing crazy about it, nothing like insanely amazing or insanely bad. I didn't think anything was really bad. It was like, like I said, you could easily say generic, but nothing about it was like, oh, it's horrible or anything. Same with Superman, where it was like, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like I was losing my mind over it. Like I saw it once and then I was done. So same thing with this. I might watch the action sequences more than I did the ones in Superman, because I didn't think much of the Superman action sequences kind of at all, if I'm being totally honest, except for like, the Mr. Terrific sequence and then the scene at the end with Superman fighting all the Lexus people. But even then, I haven't looked those up. I think I looked up the Mr. Terrific fight like one time, and then that was it. So I haven't even looked those action sequences up. But these I liked a little bit more, like I said early on, more for her fighting style. But that's really about it. So for me, it was fine. I thought it was a good movie. I'm surprised that it's kind of bombing. Like I said, you can easily say generic, but also I'm just like, dang, it just bombed. I know, Superman isn't like the biggest dude, obviously Batman. It is kind of weird, if all things considered, it is a little shocking they went Supergirl second and not, Batman would be the obvious thing to say, but I don't know what the ups and downs of all the rules are or whatever, but we got like Clayface coming out, and I know there's Man of Tomorrow coming out, which would be like Superman 2, but it is kind of weird where we are, where it's like they went Supergirl first, and it's like, that is interesting. I love it personally. I mean, if I had my pick, I'm gonna be straight up with you. I want Wonder Woman to come. I need a good one. Man, Wonder Woman 84 should have been great, right? That hurt my feelings so bad. I was glad I saw that for free, because I was upset with that movie. Because I'm like, Wonder Woman is legit my favorite out of the trio, and I was like, I just want somebody to make a good effing Wonder Woman action movie. That's all I need. She has like 15 billion weapons she can use. The amount of action you can get from that is God tier. Maybe get the dude who just did Spider-Man. Like, he's doing Naruto right now. Just bring that dude over and just have him do Wonder Woman. He clearly knows action. He did Shang-Chi. I'm hoping Spider-Man's going to be great action-wise. But just get him and just say, hey, you want to do Wonder Woman? Because I just need somebody who knows action to just do a good effing Wonder Woman movie. It's really easy, by the way. Like, I just don't understand it. So that would have been my thing. Like, just give me a God tier Wonder Woman movie. And that's all I'm asking for. But Supergirl is fine. I thought it was good. Like I said, nothing crazy good, nothing crazy bad. We'll see what happens with the universe going forward. I hope it doesn't fail. That's my whole thing. Like, I know like this movie has not done well at all, so I'm hoping it isn't the second time we get Supergirl in like one movie appearance and it's like, well, we just aren't going to do that now. I imagine this new DC universe is going to be going for a hot minute. So Hopefully everything turns out all right, but I know this one isn't doing too great in the box office, like at all. But for me, I thought it was fine. Like I said, nothing super crazy. The darker parts of the movie are my favorite parts. And like I said, that's only like maybe 10 minutes max. So that's unfortunate. But as a whole, I enjoyed the movie. There's not, there's really not too much else to it. It is a very classic story. There's nothing really crazy. I got to do this thing. You want revenge? I'm not that interested. I'm finding my way in the universe, blah, blah, blah. And then it just is what it is. Good action, great, sad moments. And then the movie's done. And then she's like, hey, I'm ready to be like a better person, so to speak. And then boom, there's the end. Not even a mid-credit scene or a post-credit scene either, which I thought was pretty interesting. But all in all, thought it was fine. So that's really it for me. Nothing too crazy. It's kind of in the middle. It's not in the middle like if you saw Mandalorian and Grogu, that was the most okayest movie ever. I would say this definitely has more, this has more to it than that film definitely did, because I'm like, I felt something watching this movie. Mando and Grogu was definitely like, this movie is good. And it was the most okayest movie I've ever seen in my life. But this movie, definitely higher heights. No, not even lower lows, just higher heights for me. So I liked the movie, thought it was fun. I'll, maybe at some point in the future, I'll show it to my girls, once it's streaming and stuff later on, we can just watch like a simple action movie and it's fun. But other than that, nothing too crazy. I am excited to see what they do with her in the future. I assume she's going to be in Man of Tomorrow, so we'll see about that. But I think it was a decent introduction for Kara, and I'm actually excited to see what they do with her character when it's like the fully realized version of Supergirl, like on Earth. That I'm also very curious about, because we don't get much of that either. Obviously, as a fan, I've seen it a million times from, let's be honest, all the effing animated movies, but that's really it. So I'd like to see it in live action, where it's like, hey, here's Kara on Earth as Supergirl. So I'm actually excited to see how that does turn out, and seeing her and Superman together, I think will be really exciting. So I'm looking forward to that in Man of Tomorrow, because it almost has to be that way. But I would love to know your thoughts on Supergirl. So definitely put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, your least favorite parts about it. Did this succeed in interesting you in more of Supergirl? Did it kill your hype for Supergirl? Did you have no hype at all? All things considered, I don't think it's bombing just because people were like, it's a bad movie, because I don't think it's that bad. So I think it was just the fact that, like, it ain't Superman, it's Supergirl. And she did have one full movie before, but we don't have to talk about that. And then she had her live action appearance. I guess technically this would be the third time she was in a movie one time. So, it is what it is. But like I said, I want to know your thoughts on it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.